Welcome to Narayana IAS Academy. This is Sureka Bhaskar presenting to you the daily news analysis. In today's discussion, we have taken up a number of articles from The Hindu and the Indian Express, which are both important and relevant for the UPSC CSE examination. Now, let us have a look at the topics. The first article has been taken from page number 6, The Hindu, Change and Continuity in India's Palestine Policy. So, this particular article talks about the evolving stance of India in the ongoing Israel-Palestine conflict and also its nuanced approach in its foreign policy and its engagement on the global stage. The second article following that has been taken from page number 8, The Indian Express, where we'll be discussing about the Ministry of Defence having signed 5 capital acquisition contracts with the domestic firms as a part of the defence indigenization program, that is defence signs deals worth 39,000 crores with the Indian firms. Moving on, the third article has been taken from page number 8, The Hindu, Center Housing Scheme for Tribal Groups Facing Hurdles. Here we'll be discussing about the hurdles faced by PM Janman scheme, and the hurdles are, catering to the lack or the inadequate data with respect to that of the PVTGs who are the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Moving on, we'll be discussing about another article taken from page number 11 of the Indian Express, A Stay Can't Be Time-Bound, What SC Ruled and Why It Matters. This actually talks about the Supreme Court having recently overturned its 2018 judgment or its decision in the expiration of the stay orders after a period of 6 months, and how is it actually significant for separation of powers as well as the judiciary discretion. We'll actually discuss in this article. The next one is the article that has been taken from page number 9, The Hindu, US drone sales to India progress to the next stage. So this actually talks about importing MQ-9 Reaper drones into India, and it talks about the 2023 deal between India and US for the importing of such drones. And towards the end of the session, we'll be solving few prelims as well as the mains practice questions. Embark on your UPSC journey with Narayana IAS Academy. Our esteemed 5-year and 3-year integrated programs are now open for admissions in Hyderabad, Vijayawada and Nellore. Our courses include robust research and development backed initiatives such as our daily news analysis, which gives us a comprehensive view program for a broader understanding of current affairs. Our NCERT program, a foundational course that covers all NCERT syllabus, which is crucial for the UPSC preparation. And followed by this, our mentorship program for personalized guidance and regular test series for systematic learning and assessment is available for your subscription. So begin your journey to becoming a leader with Narayana IAS Academy today. The first article for the day, Change and Continuity in India's Palestine Policy. So this particular article talks about India's evolving stance in the current crisis or the Israel-Palestine conflict, and also a nuanced approach in India's foreign policy as well as its engagement on the global stage. Okay, so in this article, we'll be discussing about Israel-Palestine conflict and what is India's foreign policy, that is the non-alignment movement, as well as its policy of de-hyphenation and realpolitik will be discussed here. And this can be mapped to GS Paper 2 mains under effect of policies and politics of developed and developing countries on India's interests. So moving on, if we see previous year questions, there have been questions with respect to India's relations with that of Israel. In the year 2018, we have a question, and in 2022, they had asked about I2U2 initiative between India, Israel, UAE as well as US grouping. So moving forward, let us actually understand what this particular news is about, and after which we'll understand a basic overview of the evolution of conflict between Israel and Palestine. Okay, so India's evolving stance on the Israel-Palestine conflict underscores a strategic balance, reflecting a nuanced approach in its foreign policy and engagement on the global stage. Now let us understand a brief overview on Israel-Palestine conflict, which we can actually understand through this particular infographic. Okay, so it is important to understand, prior to the World War I, actually the Jews did not have a dedicated homeland or established by them. Okay, so they were spread across regions of Europe. So this eventually actually led to a national movement by the Jewish people in order to establish a homeland in Palestine, and that time Palestine was under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. Okay, so what happened? There was a national movement, and that was Zionism, which was among the Jews in order to establish a homeland in Palestine, which was then a part of the Ottoman Empire. And this Zionism actually was triggered, or it was under the leadership, or gained momentum under the leadership of Theodor Herzl. And towards the end of the World War I, what happened was that the British actually emerged successful and there was a fall of the Ottoman Empire. So the British actually issued the Balfour Declaration of 1917. And this actually supported the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, which will not disturb the civil and the religious rights of the non-existing Jews in that particular region. And eventually what happened, the period leading up to 1947, it actually saw an increased immigration of the Jewish people into the Palestinian territory because they were facing, that is Jews were facing, an increased religious persecution in Europe. That is what you are aware of, the Holocaust and all those things. So the immigration and the subsequent growth of this Jewish population inside the territory of Palestine actually led to a lot of conflicts, and this led to the conflict between the Jewish and the Arab communities. So this is what we actually see here, that is the period of 1897 to 1947. The Zionist movement was there and the Balfour Declaration was there, and that actually led to a conflict between the Jewish as well as the Arab communities. Next, moving on, the period of 1947 and 1948, UN partition and the Arab-Israeli war. So here let us understand, in 1947, the United Nations proposed a plan to partition Palestine into, there was a plan to partition Palestine into two. That is, one was a Jewish state and next was an Arab state. And here Jerusalem will be under international control. So the United Nations in 1947 actually proposed a two-state plan where they actually said there will be an establishment of Jewish state for the Jewish people and there will be an Arab state, whereas Jerusalem will be under the international control. That was called as the corpus separatum. That is Jerusalem being under the control of the international, that is the United Nations control. So this plan was actually accepted by the Jewish state, but it was not accepted by the Arab leaders. Okay, so this led to the outbreak of a civil war. And following this, what happened? Israel with Jewish people declared independence on May 15, 1948, and this actually led to the invasion of the Palestinians into the Israel territory. But ultimately what happened was Israel won. So thereby thousands of Palestinians actually out-migrated, and this caused a lot of refugee crisis. So now we are actually clear with what happened in the Zionist movement, where they actually wanted to establish a territory in Palestine, and followed by that there was a Balfour Declaration. Then there was a UN partition and the Arab-Israeli war, where there was a corpus separatum, where the UN will be controlling the Jerusalem and there will be establishment of two states, one for the Jewish as well as the Arab. But towards the end of the civil war, Israeli people or the Israel Jewish people, they actually emerged successful. Moving on, the next one, the period of 1948 to 1979, wars and peace attempts. Okay, so the decades actually following this Israel establishment, that actually marked, or it was characterized by a lot of conflicts. Okay, so that included a lot of conflicts like the Suez Crisis of 1956, the Six-Day War of 1967, this is very, very important, and the Yom Kippur War of 1973, etc. Okay, so if you take the Six-Day War, it was very, very transformative, because Israel actually captured the regions of West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza Strip, as well as the Sinai Peninsula. It also included Golan Heights. So these particular areas of West Bank, East Jerusalem, Golan Heights, Sinai Peninsula, Gaza, etc., they became center to the conflict between the Israeli Jewish people as well as the Arab Palestinians. Okay, so the efforts to actually negotiate and come to peace and all those things were actually spoken about in this particular period, but it was very, very naive and it wasn't very successful. Now moving on to the period of 1987 to 1993, there was the first Intifada. Intifada is nothing but it was an uprising against the Israeli occupation in the West Bank as well as the Gaza Strip. Okay, so this again led to a number of protests as well as violation, and this actually led to the signing of the Oslo Accords in the year 1993. So this actually led to the recognition between the PLO and Israel as well as the establishment of the Palestinian Authority to govern the parts of West Bank and Gaza. So this was the Oslo Accord was actually seen as a step towards establishing a two-state solution. Okay, but then again many issues actually stayed unresolved. So here we have understood what is this period, that is from where the conflict had actually started from 1897 till 1993. Now let us move to the period of 2000 to 2005. Here, the second round of uprisings had actually taken place, and this triggered a lot of tension as well as violence in this Gaza region, in the West Bank region, Sinai Peninsula, etc. Okay, so it actually saw a significant loss of people, a lot of humanitarian crises were there, a lot of militarization of the conflict was actually there. So now what happened? As a result of this, Israel reoccupied the territories of Palestine and it actually started constructing a separation barrier. However, if you see in 2005, Israel actually withdrew from this Gaza Strip. Okay, and so they actually withdrew with the Israeli settlers there, but however the tensions again continued. Okay, so this was the first Intifada, that was the uprising, that is the Palestinian actually demanded the Gaza Strip, they actually demanded these areas to be their occupation. Followed by that 2000 and 2005 there was second Intifada. Then moving ahead from 2006 to 2009, what happened? Hamas had actually won. Hamas are a Palestinian group. Okay, so they actually won the Palestinian legislative elections, and there was again a huge fight between the Hamas and also the Fatah-led Palestinian Authority. So Fatah is also a political group. Okay, so Fatah was actually governing the West Bank region and Gaza was actually ruled by the Hamas region, and again there were concerns in this. So here there was a violent outbreak of conflict between these two factions. From 2012 to 2014, we have Israel, which had actually launched the Operation Pillar of Defense as well as Protective Edge in 2014, and this was actually targeting the Hamas military infrastructure at Gaza. Okay, and this actually caused a lot of humanitarian destruction as well as loss of livelihoods, etc. And now if you see, the escalation in conflict still continues in 2023, whereas if you see in October 2023, there was a significant attack by the Hamas on Israel. Okay, so this actually led to the retaliation by Israel to the Hamas attack. Okay, so now let us actually move forward. So here if you see the map, here you can actually see the Sinai Peninsula, and this was the Israel territory that they had established in the Palestinian region that was occupied by the Ottoman or ruled by the Ottoman Empire. Here is actually Syria, Jordan. This is the Golan Heights, Gaza. This was the areas of conflict. This is West Bank and Jerusalem. Okay. So moving forward, this was actually the map. That is, if you see the conflict, how it has arose. So here in 1888, you can actually see this entire region was ruled by the Ottoman Empire, and here you can see this blue region was by the British Empire. And after World War I, we can see the entire region taken up by the British, and that is when we had the Balfour Declaration. Then moving on, there was a UN resolution that was actually passed for a two-state solution. Here you have the Jewish Palestine, and then you have here the Arab Palestine was there, and Jerusalem will be under the international control. Okay. So then what happened? There was an Arab-Israeli war, and then it actually transcended to the Six-Day War, and then we have the Yom Kippur Camp David Accords, and finally we had the Oslo Accords. And this is actually the situation which is actually prevalent there, where this is Israel And this portion is actually the Palestine along Gaza, etc. Now moving forward, let us see the evolution of India's approach towards Palestine, how it has been over the years. So pre-independence support and solidarity. So pre-independence itself, there was an early support by India. It was rooted in anti-colonial solidarity because Palestine was also colonized and then India was also colonized. So it was rooted in anti-colonial solidarity. There was sympathy towards the Arabs in Palestine facing the Zionist immigration and land acquisition. Followed by that, we had many of the leaders like Mahatma Gandhi. They supported the Palestinian cause. Okay. The next one, post-independence, what happened? Since 1947 till 1990s, India advocated for Palestinian rights. It in fact voted for Palestinians' partition. It in fact voted against the Palestinians' partition at the UN in 1947 and recognized the PLO for the first time in 1974. And also influenced by India's role in non-alignment movement, and India has always been balancing its relations with the Arab countries and post-Cold War dynamics. Moving forward, there were establishment of diplomatic ties with the Israel. That is, there was a slow shift in the engagement that India had with that of the Palestine towards 1992 and the period thereof. There was a formal diplomatic relation with Israel which began in 1992. And it was influenced by the end of Cold War as well as the economic liberalization that took place in our economy around 1991 period. And despite the closer ties with Israel, India continued its support for Palestinian cause as well as a two-state solution. Then the recent developments, if you see, and the balancing act in India's foreign policy, there is a balanced diplomacy that India actually has been following post 2000s till the current one. It balances growing ties with Israel with the traditional support for the Palestine. Also, it supports the two-state solution, sovereignty and independence of Palestine, reflecting support in the UN votes and criticism of any kind of unilateral actions which affect peace. So now let us understand what are certain geopolitical principles behind India's approach towards Palestine. Okay, so the first one is realpolitik and strategic autonomy. So here, this is nothing but it is a pragmatic approach that prioritizes national interest and strategic benefits. So this no more depends on any kind of the ideology that the country follows, but India actually follows this realpolitik, and this was brought about by a person named Bismarck during the unification of Germany. He was the first chancellor of Germany. Okay, India follows the policy or the principle of realpolitik, which prioritizes its national interest as well as strategical interest above the ideology that it actually has. The next one is policy of de-hyphenation. De-hyphenation is nothing but it is to deepen its strategic interest with Israel. At the same time, it actually focuses on the relation that it shares with Palestine also, because Israel is strategically important in many other aspects like defense, agriculture, technology, etc. However, on the other side, it continues to actually support Palestine on the international fora. Thereby, it actually maintains a balance between, however, it has been, following in the historical past also. Next one is legacy of non-aligned movement, where India's support for, Palestine, it actually focuses on the sovereignty of the region, the territorial integrity on the region, as well as the principle of self-determination. And it also backs the two-state solution. The next one is geopolitical stability and security. It actually fosters global peace, energy security, counter-terrorism, etc. Understanding the kind of conflict that the Middle East region is actually going through and how Middle East is going to be an important strategic region. Okay. The next one, India actually maintains a South-South cooperation in its international relations. That is, it maintains a good support that is developed in terms of development as well as humanitarian support to Palestine, and also shares its experiences with the developing countries. So this is the end of the discussion about the Israel-Palestine conflict, how it emerged and what are the principles behind India's approach towards the Israel-Palestine conflict. The next article that we will be discussing about is defense science deals worth rupees 39,000 crores with the Indian firm. So this particular article talks about the Ministry of Defense, which has actually signed 5 capital acquisition agreements with the domestic firms as a part of its defense indigenization drive. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about what is indigenization in defense sector and how it is significant for India. And this is a part of self-reliant or the Atmanirbhar Bharat agenda of the government. And this can be mapped to GS paper 3 under mains under the topics of indigenization of technology, various security forces and agencies. So if we move forward, we will actually have a previous year question in the year 2014 which actually asked about the FDI in the defense sector and what influence this is expected to have on the Indian defense and the economy in both the long as well as the short run. So here, let us understand the news, okay? So, the Ministry of Defense has actually signed 5 capital acquisition contracts worth over 40,000 crores with the domestic firms as part of the defense indigenization drive. Now, let us actually discuss about what this particular contract or the deal with the domestic firms is all about. The deals are actually signed with both the state-owned and the private domestic manufacturers, and the contracts include upgraded fighter jet engines, supersonic cruise missiles, close-in weapon systems, high-power radars, as well as the ship-borne BrahMos systems. So here, it is important to understand the concept of indigenization of defense. So what do you mean by indigenization? It is nothing but it is the development and the manufacturing of the defense equipment and the systems domestically within the territory of India, fostering self-reliance in defense. This is a part of the Atmanirbhar or the self-reliant agenda of the government. Here, we have the entities like the DRDO, which is nothing but the Defense Research and Development Organization. Then we have the defense public sector undertakings, that is the DPSUs, and private firms play a pivotal role in this particular endeavor of indigenization of defense. So now let us look at the need for defense indigenization and how it is going to be significant for India. Okay, so the first need for defense indigenization is to reduce the import dependency. So India actually stands as the largest importer of arms after Saudi Arabia and Ukraine. And also, if you actually see, according to the CIPRI International Arm Transfer Report, that is 2022 report, India stands as the largest arm importers from the year 2018 to 2022. And thus, indigenization becomes imperative to reduce reliance on the foreign sources for the arms equipments, okay? The next one is capacity building. Okay, capacity building, that is the creation of advanced weapon systems for various platforms, is actually crucial in order to counter the evolving threats and enhancing operational readiness of the armed forces. For example, if you see, India had actually developed advanced defense systems such as we have the Tejas light combat aircraft as well as the Arihant nuclear submarine. Moving forward, the next one is for India to become a regional power or to gain the net security provider in South Asia, indigenization of defense actually plays a crucial role. Okay, so to act as a net security provider in South Asia, that is which in turn actually contributes to the regional stability. For example, India actually exports Akash missile defense system to Philippines. So here you can actually see development of advanced defense capabilities contributes to the regional stability. So that is what is over here. Export of Akash missile defense system to Philippines is stated as an example. The next one is employment generation. That is, if we reduce the imports that is made by India in the area of defense by 20 to 25%, this could create 100,000, that is around 1 lakh to 1.2 lakh of highly skilled jobs in India. Now moving forward, let us actually see what are the challenges for defense indigenization in India. Okay, The first one is, of course, there is inadequate funding for research and development. That is, India allocates only 6% of its defense budget to the defense research and development, while in case of USA and China, it is around 12% and 20% respectively. The next one is, the next challenge is over-reliance on the public sector. There is dominance of certain organizations like the DRDO, the OFB, as well as the Hindustan Aeronautical Limited. This leads to bureaucratic hurdles in defense production as well as export. Okay. The next one, there is insufficient private sector involvement, where the private sector engagement in defense manufacturing, particularly by the micro, small as well as the medium enterprises, still remains limited. The next one is lack of coordinated oversight. What is this? The absence of a centralized body which actually oversees the process of defense indigenization efforts. This results in the lack of coordination among different agencies like the DRDO as well as the DPSUs. And of course, there are infrastructural deficiencies. That is, anything that you produce internally within your territory that actually requires a lot of infrastructure and sophisticated infrastructure for running the testing, okay, which is actually absent in India. And ultimately, we actually rely on the other countries for its testing as well. And thereby, we end up importing these equipments, okay. So moving forward, what are some of the government initiatives to promote the defense indigenization? We will actually quickly run through this. The first one is budgetary support. That is, if you see in the Union Budget 2022-23, 68% of the defense budget is allocated for the indigenous defense production. The next one is the Make in India program, where under the program, 2 defense industrial corridors, one in Uttar Pradesh and the other one in Tamil Nadu, have been established. The next one is the DAP 2020, which is nothing but the defense acquisition procedure, where the preference for the products designed, developed and manufactured in India has been given. The next one is Defense Production and Export Promotion Policy 2020, according to which it actually acts as a guiding document for self-reliance and exports. The next one is the Shrijan portal, which is nothing but it is an online marketplace for indigenization efforts. The next one is offset policy, which mandates the foreign defense vendors to invest in India's defense sector. The next one is IDEX, that is Innovation for Defense Excellence, and this actually supports the startups and individuals to develop new defense technologies. Followed by that, we have Technology Development Fund, that is the TDF, which encourages the industry participation in defense technology development. And the final one is foreign investment, that is the foreign direct investment is allowed under automatic route up to 74% and up to 100% through government intervention, okay, or the government routes. Now, let us look at the current status of the defense indigenization in India. Okay, so if you look at this particular, piece of infographic, here the share of indigenous defense procurement has actually considerably increased from 50% in 2014 to about 68% in 2022-2023, according to the reports of the Union Budget 2023. Okay, so the government has also set a target to achieve around 75% of indigenous defense procurement by 2025. Now, India has developed a wide range of indigenous defense equipment, and some of the examples are, if you see Tejas light combat aircraft, and then there is Dhruv, which is an example. Next one is light utility helicopter, the Cheetah helicopter, etc. And in ships and submarines, we can see the Kolkata class destroyers, we can see the Vishakhapatnam class destroyers, etc. And if you see other weapons, it actually includes BrahMos supersonic cruise missile, and then the Akash surface to air missile, the Pinaka multi-barrel rocket launcher, as well as the Dhanush howitzer. The next article that we'll be discussing about is Centre's housing scheme for tribal groups faces hurdles due to the lack of accurate data. So this particular article discusses about the hurdles that have been faced by the PM Janman scheme, which is facing a lot of hurdles due to the inaccurate data with respect to that of PVTGs, that is the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Okay, so here PM Janman actually stands for PM Janjati Adivasi Nyaya Maha Abhiyan. So in this article, we'll be discussing about what is the PM Janman scheme and what are the features of the scheme and the target beneficiaries of this particular scheme. And also we'll look into who are the PVTGs and what are the geographical distribution in India. And we can map it to the demographics under prelims, and under mains, we can map it under GS paper 2 welfare schemes for vulnerable sections of the population. So moving forward, there have been previous year questions. For example, in the year 2019, there was a question asked about the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, that is the PVTGs. So this particular topic becomes an important topic for discussion. So moving forward, let us actually look into the news. So PM Janjati Adivasi Nyaya Maha Abhiyan, that is the PM Janman scheme, is facing a lot of hurdles due to the lack of accurate data on the PVTGs, who are the particularly vulnerable tribal group population. So moving forward, it is important to understand this particular scheme under the schemes for the vulnerable sections of the population and can also be mapped to social justice. So about the PM Janjati Adivasi Nyaya Maha Abhiyan, let us actually see what the scheme is about. Okay. So the launch of the scheme, this particular scheme was announced in the Union Budget 2022-23. However, it was launched in November 2023. What is the objective of the scheme? Is to improve the socio-economic conditions of the PVTGs and the focus areas, that is, it encompasses a number of sectors ranging from safe housing, access to clean water, improved healthcare, education, nutrition, road and telecommunication connectivity, as well as opportunities for sustainable livelihoods. Okay. So the implementing agency it is actually a composition, or it is an amalgamation of the central sector as well as the centrally sponsored schemes, and primarily it is implemented by the Ministry of Tribal Affairs in coordination with the state governments as well as the PVTG communities. However, it has a number of critical interventions for which there is the overseeing by 9 ministries ranging from Ministry of Sanitation, then Ministry of Jal Shakti, then we also have the Ministry of Skill Development, etc. alongside the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. And the scheme duration is from 2023 period to 2026. Okay, so the total budget outlay is about 24,000 crores, where the central share is about 15,336 crores, and the share by the states is around 9,000 crores. Now let us look into what are the hurdles that have been faced by the PM Janman scheme. Okay, so the first one is target shortfalls. Okay, so against the total sanctioning of 2.5 lakh houses by February 2024, the number of houses that have been sanctioned so far is only 1.59 lakh houses. Okay, so this actually indicates a significant lag in the implementation of the scheme. The next one is varying population estimates. Okay, so the problem is that the government heavily relies on the PM Gati Shakti portal. So Gati Shakti portal is nothing but it is an umbrella portal which comprises of the database of all the implementation stages of the infrastructure programs and various other schemes. So since the reliance of the government is heavy on the PM Gati Shakti portal, fluctuation in the PVTG population estimates is actually not very accurate, because earlier it was 28 lakhs and that was seen to increase to around 36.5 lakhs. And now it has increased drastically to 44.64 lakhs. Okay, so this process, that is this inaccuracy, will actually complicate the process of planning as well as resource allocation for the PVTG population. The next one is the survey as well as the deadline pressure on the state government is actually immense. So that what happens is that since there is extreme pressure in submitting the survey as well as the action plans, there are incomplete surveys that are submitted, and also there is rush in the processes in order to meet these particular deadlines. The next one is discrepancies of the databases. We already saw the data which has been held by the central government actually varies with that of the data that has been held by the state governments. So moving forward, the last one is the dynamic nature of the PVTG population. That is, PVTG population are highly characterized by increased migration. So this particular increased migration in search of employment, all these things actually adds to the complexity of identifying who the exact beneficiaries are and what are their accurate numbers. So now we'll actually complete this article by looking into who are the PVTGs exactly. So the PVTGs are the most vulnerable or the more vulnerable among the tribal groups. Okay, for example, we have the Jarawas, the Great Andamanis, the Sentinels, as well as the Saharias are examples of the PVTG tribes here. The history is that in 1973, according to the Debar Commission, it created the primitive tribal groups category. And what are the criteria for identification of the PVTGs are? First one, they have to have a pre-agricultural level of technology. They have to have a low literacy rate. There has to be an economic backwardness in the community. And finally, they have to be having a decline or a stagnant population. Now, the identification is there are around 75 PVTGs out of the total 705 scheduled tribes by the central government, that is the Government of India. And the categorization is done by the Ministry of Home Affairs and not the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. This is very, very important and it can be a prelims fact possibly. And however, if we see the distribution of PVTGs across India, the highest number are in Odisha and there are no PVTGs in the states of Punjab and Haryana. The next article that we'll be discussing about is a stay can't be time bound, what Supreme Court ruled and why it matters. So this particular article talks about the Supreme Court recently overturning its 2018 decision on the automatic expiration of the stay orders after a period of 6 months, emphasizing the need for judicial discretion as well as increasing the efficiency for handling the legal proceedings. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about what is judicial discretion, how it is important, and also we'll be discussing the concept of separation of powers. And this can be mapped to GS Paper 2 mains, structure, organization, and functioning of the executive and the judiciary. So moving forward, we have previous year questions in the year 2016 and 2020, where the 2020 question was on the doctrine of separation of powers, and in 2016 we see that it was actually asked about the Coelho case. And in that context, can you say that the judicial review is of key importance amongst the basic features of the Constitution? So here the basic features of the Constitution and the intervention of the judiciary is very, very important. Okay. So moving forward, let us actually look into what this particular article is about. Recently, the Supreme Court has overturned its 2018 decision on the automatic expiration of stay orders after 6 months, emphasizing the need for judicial discretion and a more nuanced approach to handling the legal proceedings. That is, now it is important to understand what are these stay orders and what are the challenges or concerns associated with the same. Okay. So what are stay orders? These are legal directives which are issued by the court in order to temporarily halt a proceeding or any kind of action in a particular case. And these orders are meant to preserve the status quo and also to ensure the rights of the parties involved are not unduly affected while a matter is under consideration or appeal. That is, the court actually puts a halt to the proceedings temporarily on a particular case. Okay. So this is actually to preserve the status quo and ensure that the rights of both the plaintiff, that is the person who actually puts the case, and the defendant are actually protected at the same time. And the stay orders can impact the case proceedings significantly, as they can delay the trials because certain cases actually takes a number of decades or years for its final verdict to be delivered by the court, and the hearings and the enforcement of judgments affecting both the plaintiff and the defendant as well as the efficiency of the legal system. Okay, so this is why we have a lot of backlogs of cases in the judiciary. So moving forward, let us actually see the 2018 Asian resurfacing case. Okay. So now let us understand. In 2018 Asian resurfacing case, a 3-judge bench of the Supreme Court had recognized that the stay orders are actually necessary. So while necessary in certain circumstances, often are leading to undue delays in the trial processes, okay, which in turn affects the efficiency of the functioning of the judiciary. In order to address this, the Supreme Court actually ruled that the stay orders issued by the high courts or the civil courts in criminal cases would automatically expire after a period of 6 months unless explicitly extended. Okay. So this decision actually aimed to expedite the legal process and to prevent prolonged delay in trials. For example, if you take the case of Nambi Narayanan, Okay, so Nambi Narayanan was actually a topmost or one of the best efficiently performing scientists of the ISRO. So he was actually booked under the Official Secrets Act as he was alleged to actually, send out information to the Pakistan government regarding India's or ISRO's cryogenic mission. Okay, so the case actually took around 2 decades to actually have its final verdict and to prove that the allegations on him were false. So for that case, they said that there would be an automatic expiration of the 6 months, okay, of the stay orders. Moving forward, why the 2018 ruling has been overruled by the Supreme Court recently is what we're going to see. So, overturned by a 5-judge constitution bench, which argued that setting a 6-month automatic expiration for the stay orders will actually lead to a lot of injustice. Okay, that is, here they are actually focusing more on the discretion of the judiciary, because 6 months might not be enough for collection of adequate evidence for a particular case. Next one, the bench emphasized that the discretion of the lower courts to manage their caseload and make decisions based on the specifics of the case should be respected. Moving on, the court highlighted that automatic vacation of stay orders. What do you mean by vacation? That is automatic expiration of the stay orders after 6 months without a judicial hearing could nullify even the lawfully passed interim orders by the lower courts. Okay, so potentially this harms the parties who are involved. Who are the parties? The plaintiff, the person who actually puts the case against another person who is the defendant involved, and undermines the principle of justice. Now let us look at what are the possible implications of overruling the 2018 decision by the Supreme Court. So the first one is acknowledgement of legal complexities. Okay, that is, the Supreme Court's decision to overrule its earlier ruling. It emphasizes the understanding and complexities and variations in the legal cases, advocating for a more nuanced approach than simply vacating or expiring the stay orders. Okay. Next one is emphasis on judicial discretion, and this highlights the importance of allowing judicial discretion in deciding when to prioritize the hearing of the applications for vacating or rescinding the stay orders, that is, to continue ensuring the flexibility in the judicial process. That is, basically they are saying there has to be a flexibility in the judicial process. At the same time, it has to be the discretion of the judiciary, because it actually, there are a lot of variations and complications which vary from case to case. Okay. Next one is balancing speedy trials with rights. This is nothing but it aims to find a middle ground. That is, the recent overturning finds the middle ground that accommodates a necessity. That is, on the one side, we need swift justice, and on the other side, it is essential to safeguard the rights of the involved parties, and you also have to at the same time acknowledge the realities of the workload that the judiciary actually undergoes and the priorities of the judiciary. Okay. The next one is it actually gives a clarification on the role of legislature versus judiciary, and this is where we have the concept of separation of power pitching in. Here, the judgment delineates the responsibilities between the legislature and the judiciary, indicating that the specific timelines of the judicial proceedings have to be set up by the legislature. So it falls under the legislative jurisdiction, thereby respecting the concept of separation of powers. The next article that we are discussing about is US drone sales to India progress to the next stage. So this particular article deals with a June 2023 deal between India and the United States to import about 31 MQ-9B Reaper drones to India from the US for India's defense purposes. Okay, so in this particular article, we'll be discussing about what are these MQ-9B Reaper drones, and this is relevant from defense technology for India. And this particular topic can be mapped to the UPSC examination under current events of national and international importance under prelims, and for mains, it can be mapped under GS Paper 3, Security Forces and Agencies. So there have been a number of previous year questions, and specifically this particular topic is relevant from a 2021 question that reads, how is S-400 air defense system technically superior to any other system presently available in the world? And there has been a question in 2016 asked about the border management and how it is a complex task due to difficult terrain and hostile relations with some countries. And in 2018, there has been a question in the prelims examination with respect to the terminal high altitude area defense, that is the THAAD sometimes, which was seen in news. So here we understand that the various kind of drones or the equipments or the technology transfer that India actually gains from the other countries, as well as its utilization and implementation in India for its defense purposes, is important for discussion for the examination. Now moving on, let us actually understand what this particular news is about. The possible sale of about 31 MQ-9B Reaper drones from the United States to India has progressed to the next stage. So now let us understand what is this particular deal talking about. Okay, so the deal actually pegged at an estimated 3.99 billion US dollars, that is around $4 billion, was announced in June 2023 during the visit of Indian Prime Minister to the United States, that is Washington DC. Okay. Then, the proposed deal actually comprises of supplying or importing around 8 Sky Guardians for the Indian Army, 8 for the Indian Air Force, as well as 15 Sea Guardians for Indian Navy. Now, let us understand the characteristic features of these MQ-9B Reaper drones. Okay, so starting with the overview, it is an high altitude long endurance drone. If you actually see in this picture, so this is the image of the MQ 9B Reaper drone. So it is an high altitude long endurance drone, and this is equipped with the strike missiles for the precision targets. That is, it is very precise and sharp in targeting its targets. The developer is General Atomics Aeronautical Systems for the United States Air Force. And the variants of this particular Reaper drones include the Sky Guardian, which is good at advanced surveillance as well as reconnaissance. And the Sea Guardian is characterized by, or it is used for maritime patrol, anti-submarine, as well as other surveillance purposes. Okay. So now looking at the salient features of these Reaper drones, it operates over 40,000 feet. The maximum endurance of this particular drone is about 40 hours. Next one, it supports both land as well as maritime surveillance, which will be advantageous for India, and anti-submarine warfare and other activities as well. The payload capacity of these drones are around 4,750 pounds, that is around 5,000 pounds, and it has advanced features such as auto takeoff and landing, that is automatic taking off as well as the landing features. Next one is detect and avoid system. What is this detect and avoid system? It cannot be detected by any kind of radar. Okay, so this characteristic is called as stealth feature. Okay, or stealth drone. That is, the presence of your drone is not detected by a particular country's radar system. Next one is anti-spoofing GPS, that is, no one can intervene in the positioning of this particular drone. Next one is encrypted communication. What do you mean by encrypted communication? In case of WhatsApp and other apps, you can see this particular conversation is end-to-end, encrypted, right? Which is nothing but it is very difficult to decrypt that particular conversation or the message. So here it is an encrypted communication on similar lines. And finally, it is equipped with air-to-ground missiles as well as smart bombs also. Moving forward, now let us look at the significance of MQ-9B Reaper drones for the Indian Armed Forces. In what way this will be helpful? The first one is cost effectiveness. Okay, that is, the MQ-9B drones provide approximately 80% of the same capabilities that is provided by the large human-flown maritime patrol aircraft at around only about 20% of the cost per hour. Okay, that is, when compared to the large human-flown maritime patrol aircraft, this actually incurs, or this actually needs you to invest only 20% of the cost per hour, which makes them a much more economical option for India, for navies particularly. Next one is, it is characterized by enhanced surveillance. Okay, what does that mean is, they enable continuous surveillance, greatly extending India's ability in order to monitor the strategic locations, particularly the LAC, that is the line of actual control along China, and LOC, that is a line of control across Pakistan. Okay, within the adversary territories, that is, I told you. Next one is integration with existing platforms is also possible with these drones. That is, these drones can be easily integrated with India's existing US origin military assets. What are the assets? It is the P-8I maritime patrol aircraft, AH-64 Apache helicopters, and MH-60R helicopters, and all this actually enhances the interoperability as well as the operational flexibility for India. Now let us solve few prelims and mains practice questions. The first question reads, consider the following statements about the Defense Acquisition Council. It decides on the policies and the capital acquisition for the Army, Navy, Air Force and the Indian Coast Guard. This is correct. It is headed by the Ministry of Home Affairs. Wrong. The answer is Ministry of Defense. So since only the statement 1 is correct, the answer is option A. Moving on to the second question, consider the following statements about the PVTGs. Low levels of literacy is one of the criteria for identification. Yes. No PVTGs are found in the states of Punjab and Haryana. Yes. And the Ministry of Tribal Affairs decides on the categorization of PVTG. This is wrong. This is Ministry of Home Affairs. So since statements 1 and 2 are correct, the answer will be option A. Moving on to the next question, it reads, consider the following lakes, Lake Nasser, Dead Sea, Lake Assad and Karaun Lake. Arrange the countries in which these lakes are located in the clockwise manner starting from the northeast of Israel. Now let us match it quickly. Lake Nasser is in Egypt. Moving ahead, Dead Sea is in Jordan. Lake Azad is in Syria. And finally, Karaun is in Lebanon. So going by this, the answer will be option A, 3, 2, 1 and 4. So moving forward, the fourth question reads, consider the following statements about MQ-9B Reaper drones. They are developed by Israel. This is wrong. By US. They are the only drone systems in the world to be fitted with the GPS devices. This is also wrong. So the answer is neither 1 nor 2, option D. So moving on to the fifth question. It actually talks about match the following drone systems with the country they belong to. MQ-9 Reaper, United States, this is correct. Heron, Israel, this is also correct. Orion, Russia, this is also correct. And Watchkeeper, United Kingdom, this is also correct. So since all 4 are correctly matched, the option or the answer will be option A. That is A1, B2, C3 and D4. Now solving the mains practice question, the question reads, describe the evolution of India's approach towards Palestine over the years, particularly in the light of recent escalation of the Israel-Hamas conflict. List the guiding principles of India's foreign policy in this particular context. Now, the approach to this particular question is divided into introduction, body and conclusion. In the introduction, we will briefly introduce India's historical stance on the Israel-Palestine conflict and its significance considering the recent escalations. In the body, we will talk about the evolution of the approach from pre-independence solidarity to the balanced approach in the 21st century. Later on, we will substantiate our points with relevant examples like India's voting at the UN, etc. And next we'll move on to the guiding principles where the principles of strategic autonomy and realpolitik, de-hyphenation policy of India, NAM, that is the NAM, non-aligned movement legacy, the geopolitical stability and South-South cooperation will be spoken about here. And moving to the conclusion, we will summarize India's evolving approach towards Palestine, emphasizing the blend of its historical solidarity as also the strategic pragmatism guiding its foreign policy. So with this, we've come to the end of our DNA discussion. So for regular updates, please do like, share and subscribe to Narayana IAS Academy YouTube channel. Thank you.